Under the blazing hot sun of Egypt, camel rides in front of the pyramids of Giza are extremely popular among tourists. To foreigners, these animals are nothing more than a transportation method used in this region of the world. While this isn't inaccurate, the massive influence that the camel has had on the emergence of empires, trade, and culture all over North Africa and the Middle East is overlooked. Due to the camel's distinct physical features, it was able to transform this vast landscape from being a series of individual powers to becoming an interconnected network of flows of cultures, goods, and knowledge. In order to examine the camel's true impact on this region of the world, we're going to have to travel back to the Tuareg region, present-day Morocco, during the Middle Ages, where we ask ourselves, how did a domesticated animal transform a region of more than 15 million square kilometers? Hello, I'm Faysal al-Kibbi, and this podcast was produced as part of the Premodern Worlds podcast project at Georgetown University. Our artifact today is a camel saddle of Tuareg origin, a tribe of nomadic North Africans inhabiting desert regions of Morocco and Mauritania. Their desert lifestyles make them very fond of camels, evident in our saddle's appearance. It looks like a lavish wooden chair, but one wouldn't expect it to be used to sit on animals. Based on first impressions, it seems rather luxurious for something so simple. How intriguing. This lavishness comes out in the geometric shapes on the saddle, such as the pointed arch at the back of the seat, as well as the asterisk-like structure in front, the handle. Arches were, and still are, the norm in large Islamic buildings such as mosques, perhaps indicating Islamic influence. Furthermore, the pointed edges all around it exemplify the royalty and style accompanying our saddle. It could have belonged to perhaps royalty, or maybe someone rich, or perhaps it was just a standard at the time. Just by looking at it, we can tell it was designed as more of a status symbol rather than a practical travel necessity. The Saharan desert is renowned for its unfathomable temperatures and its nearly deadly climate. This is exactly the reason that the camel became such a pivotal part of desert dwellers' lives during the medieval period. Built for the desert, they actually have no problem dealing with the scorching sun and its challenges. In addition, they're designed for travel, making it the optimal desert animal to domesticate in an era without dune buggies. For instance, they could trek 40 kilometers on any given day and carry more than 200 kilograms on their backs while doing it, with also a longer lifespan than horses or donkeys. These abilities allowed for more efficient trade of West African gold, for example, across the Sahara, one of the many ways that the camel was able to revolutionize trade during the medieval period. It's hard to believe that an animal could shift the economic landscape of a continent, but that was exactly the case with the widespread introduction of the caravan. These camel caravans would typically be on the move for months, trading all types of goods from salt to slaves. Dr. Mark Cartwright from the Ancient History Encyclopedia has done extensive amounts of exploration into the camel's historical influence and has contributed greatly to our investigation into trade as well as the rest of the podcast going forward. His research in part entails how the introduction of the Roman Empire in North Africa around the 1st century BC prompted a huge influx of goods to be traded across the continent, which would have been impossible without the new camel caravan structure, as opposed to the traditional singular trader of goods. The owners of our saddle, the Tuareg people, were another influential force controlling one of the first Saharan routes for trade, going from Algeria to Niger. Camels allowed such routes to be viable, whereas they had previously seen as impossible and deadly. The camel caravan expanded trade to stretch all across the desert, allowing for empires to spread instead of being limited to localities. This expansion through trans-Saharan trade created major shifts in the societies of several North African cities through the social integration of nomadic folk into larger empires and kingdoms surrounding them. Nomads were never truly integrated into cities during the medieval era. They were seen as outcasts by city dwellers and were never properly acknowledged by leaders either. Dr. Elia Kola is an associate professor in Arab and Middle Eastern studies at Georgetown University, and as he puts it,
they're on the border regions of every country where they are. So the Tuaregs tend to be away from the capitals, wherever they are. And for that reason, I think that might have been key for their survival, but they've always been perceived also by these various states as a potential threat because they're a political minority, ethnic minority, linguistic minority. They oftentimes have far more in common with people across their border.
The nomadic people were also camel specialists. Kola.
A nomadic kind of living situation, which, as we're going to talk about, is only possible because of animals. Human beings could not live that way. They can only live that way when they're working in an interdependent way with camels and horses and things, right? The distances are just too great and the work is just so hard that they couldn't do it otherwise.
The nomads' camel expertise allowed for them to get involved with the trade, making them middlemen in the traveling process, which was becoming ever so popular. This rise in caravans put the spotlight on transporters of the goods, and not just the producers and consumers. This made trade much more profitable for the middlemen, usually the nomads, and also increased the social status of these Arab tribesmen. All in all, camel trade allowed for distant and excluded desert dwellers to become essential components of urbanized large cities as interactions with trading cities were more and more frequent. In addition, the camel has indirectly influenced cultures and their mingling, societies, and even religion during the medieval period. Still on the topic of trade, camels allowed for more than just the exchange of physical goods. One of the most significant examples of this spread of cultural influence through trade was the spread of Islam, where the camel played a pivotal role. Cartwright fills in the picture well with his research into the introduction of Islam among the Sudanese. Today, Sudan is known as a dominantly Muslim country, and this can be attributed to caravans and traders on camelback during the 9th century. Not only did the Muslim philosophy take over the region, but so did typical Muslim architectural styles and building methods. The spread of Islam on camelback wasn't unique just to the Sudanese region during the medieval era. Countless communities west of the Arabian Peninsula were learning about and converting to Islam, and the camel is what permitted the Islamic Empire to spread across Africa. The camel is so significant to the region that it's even mentioned in the Quran as being one of God's first creations. During these pre-modern times, the camel has become of such importance to desert communities that it has acquired its own social standing and respect among all classes of the social hierarchy. This is certainly not the first thing the Western world thinks of when camels are mentioned. This value can even be seen in the travels of Ibn Battuta in the Sahara. Ibn Battuta is a notorious traveler, known to have ventured across all parts of the world from China to Africa. Here is an excerpt from a record of his travels.
Ibn Battuta set about preparing for his next major destination. This was Khwarizm, 40 days' march across the desert, the city itself still within Uzbek's domains. 10 days out, at the city of Sarachuk, the horses were sold and replaced by camels to draw the wagons, owing to the scarcity of fodder and limited water holes along the route.
This is a perfect example of how valued the camel is. Battuta was very willing to sacrifice his mighty horses in exchange for regular camels, knowing that no other animal could endure the harsh journey lying ahead of him. The camel's role in societies is extremely apparent among the Sahrawi people, who are nomads who also thrived during the Middle Ages thanks to their domestication of the camel. Every Sahrawi tribe during this era had a camel expert, and surprisingly, these camel experts are held in extremely high regard and are treated with much respect. This camel expert was called the Dayar, and he was often mentioned several times in Sahrawi literature with high praise and admiration. In several other cultures, the animal is known as a symbol of power and wealth, and this total admiration for the camel has bled into folk media, like poems, myths, and sayings. These can be seen in ancient Ethiopian folk literature, where camels are mentioned very often and always in positive light. For example, there is a common saying originating from pre-modern times, which when translated in English reads,
"Camels don't go to donkeys, like chiefs don't go to children."
In this saying, not only are camels being shown as the most superior animal to own, but it also integrates a higher social standing of the animal by comparing it to a chief instead of, for example, a warrior. Somehow, the camel is so valuable to the Ethiopians that they've gone to such lengths to compare it to the highest ranking official in any society. Here is another example of an extract from ancient Ethiopian poetry.
"Slender is your mien, and so is your body. Long is your neck. You have eyelids just like a lady, and black are your thighs like a woman."
The camel isn't typically regarded as a beautiful animal, but here it's personified as a beautiful woman, admired for its beauty. These extracts praise the camel from multiple facets of societal judgment, social standing, and physical appearance. And these extracts are few examples of many which do the same. The camel's influence on medieval Africa is unmeasurable as it changed the way that people perceived the desert. Previously seen as a natural roadblock, the camel transformed the desert into a crossable route. It's this mobility which allowed for North African empires to develop economically, culturally, and even socially.